Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RCade Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through the sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my very special guest today is Katrina Palena, and she's the High Performance Executive Relationship Coach. And before I pass it on to her to further introduce herself, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for being with me on the podcast and for taking the time to share your experience with the audience today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So why don't we dive right in? Katrina, can you please walk us through your journey and how you ended up choosing your current career?
Sure. So it really all, the most latest kind of working in the relationship space really started from transitioning my behavioral science work, which is the field that I was in, into being an executive coach, given that I've worked with founders my whole life, I've worked with executives my whole life, and then realizing that a lot of the executives that I was coaching had difficulties in their relationships. And that would manifest through being very anxious or being stressed or overthinking or exhausted. I literally was just talking to a founder right now, how exhausted he is with his life and his relationship and how it's really impacting his ability to actually build his business. And so as I was coaching these executives, it really kind of began to dawn on me that the area of life that I find most interesting, that I've had the most difficulty with, relationships, was probably actually the area that I should be focusing on. And it kind of all makes sense, right? Because it's something that I really struggled with my whole life. It's something I saw my parents struggle with. It's something I invested tons of money into figuring out for myself. And I always kept it really private. It was always something that I was like, I'm not going to talk about this. You know, this isn't, of course it's a profession, but I was like, it's not something I can ever do publicly. And it just kind of all came through a couple of years back when I was like, I think this actually is something that I need to be focusing on. And I need to pull my own finger out and start talking about this.
Awesome. No, it's a great topic actually. And I bet there's a lot of people who are struggling with it. I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, this is an area in their career, no matter what stage they're at in their career. And even the high performers have struggled with this. I know I have throughout, my journey. So it's great to be talking to you today. And I'm gonna be picking your brain and asking you a lot of questions about this. Now, before I get to some of my questions, I wanted to ask you, throughout your coaching sessions and what you've gone through so far, what have you learned about yourself that's kind of stood out?
What have I learned about myself? I mean, so much. I tell all my clients this, again, because a lot of not all my clients, it's probably like 50-50 split. That 50% of my clients are entrepreneurs, 50% are execs. But I tell all of them who are entrepreneurs that I'm like, I think honestly, a relationship, the kind of soulmate relationship, and building your business are the two most, I guess, disarming, confronting things that we can do, right? Because it brings up all of your triggers, all of those triggers, which if you're in a corporate job, you can typically hide because you're hiding behind your desk, you're hiding behind a brand name, you're hiding behind your manager or your boss, you're hiding behind a title, you can hide. But when you're an entrepreneur, it's so confronting and so revealing because you have to bring your full self to the table. And that's something I don't think I was fully expecting. So it's kind of interesting because when I did all this work on my relationships for the past 15 years or 15, 20 years, got to this point where I was feeling pretty good, pretty stable, things were going well, I'm happily married and things were just kind of like good. Things were just really calm and lovely and peaceful. And that's when I started building the business. And I did not expect how many of the kind of the things that I figured I'd like worked through and laid to rest in my relationship would pop up. Not too badly, like not significantly, but like the remnants would be there. And I'd be staring them into the eye of like, we'd gone. I thought this core wound or this limiting belief or this pattern had gone, and now it's here. So I think that's something that I really, it's been kind of surprising for me as well.
Nice. Awesome. And thank you for sharing that. So as you know, many successful executives in their careers they're successful in their careers, but they struggle with their personal lives. In your experience, what are the common barriers that prevent high achievers from finding lasting relationships?
Such a good question. There's so many ways I can take this. I think one of the biggest ways, and probably the way that I focus on the most, is there's a reason you're a high achiever. There's a reason that you're an ambitious executive. Not everyone's out there ambitious, right? And typically, you can have healthy ambition, but you can also have kind of what I would say normal ambition, which is the ambition that we see on like LinkedIn, on a lot of public forums. And if you go to a VC, like the kind of ambition that's fueling the business growth. And a lot of that fuel and motivation and ambition is coming from a slightly wounded place. And I say that with love. It's coming from a place where at some point, many, many decades ago, as a child, there was a sense and a belief formed that I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm defected. That's a really big one. And so that's the core wound that, when unexamined, can actually create really amazing patterns for us, right? Like it can make us be really high achieving. It can make us be really hardworking. It can make us be very self-sacrificing and actually be able to, put our own needs out the way and like plow through and get things done and show up relentlessly. And I say all of this kind of with my hand raised, right? Because it's very much what I was doing for so long. And yet at the same time, that same core wound is terrible for our relationships.
Yes.
Because if you truly believe that you are not good enough, sure, it's going to make you aspirational and keep aiming for the stars and keep proving yourself to the world and making all that money and getting all the promotions and building all those businesses. But from a relational point of view, you're going to be self-sabotaging every healthy relationship that comes your way. And so that's why I work with this kind of demographic, not only because I know it so well myself, but it's from kind of the modality that I work in, which is all about identifying the core wounds, getting to their root cause and clearing them out at the root. It's like the fastest thing that we can do that's actually going to make you better in your relationships, but also in your career. Because final thing I'll say is, like, statistically, if we look at people who don't have this core wounding, this kind of core programming, but either because they've healed it and they've worked through it, or they just didn't have it in the first place, they actually go out there to earn more money, to build more things, to have better lives, because they have more mental real estate in their brains that's free for self-actualization. And they're not having to be bogged down in anxiety, insecurity, insomnia, overthinking, ruminating, self-doubt, like all of these things, addiction, whatever it might be.
That's right.
So it's always worth doing this work, even if you're like, oh, I don't know if my relationships are that important. They are, but the kind of side effects are so much greater than your relationships.
That's right. No, I really love the fact that you said show up relentlessly. So, me going back, there was a point in my life where, something happened and that kind of triggered me to say, hey, I'm putting my head down and I got to go after, all these goals that I put in place. I got to make myself better so this thing doesn't happen again. And I was very relentless with my goals. And I see what you mean. So with people like executives, the high achievers, whoever they are, they kind of go one way and they work on this part. And I think they mask the other part through it. And they're very delicate when it comes to relationships, but they're very strong when it comes to, their work, etc. And I've heard it with, some of the women I've dated say the same. They're very like powerful in the office, but in the relationship side, that's where they struggle because of those effects.
Yeah, completely.
And I'll get to a question later on, but that's fantastically put. Now, how does a demanding career impact one's ability to maintain and nurture personal relationships? Can you share some of the examples from your, coaching sessions that you've had?
Yeah. I mean, the most obvious one is going to be long hours, right? Like, again, why do I work with executives and entrepreneurs? Because I could, but I would be flummoxed if I encountered someone who's in a relationship and they're working, 20 hours a week and they're twiddling their thumbs and they're chilling on a beach having a pina colada and they're wondering why their marriage isn't going well. I would be able to help, but I would also be like, what have you been doing all this time?
Mhm.
Like, how did you get to this place? Whereas with people who are busy and are working, the classic, like at least 40 hours a week, and 40 hours a week seems like a joke, but, kind of over that period, it's inevitable that you're going to be ships in the night. You're going to be busy. You're going to have different priorities potentially. Communication is going to be stilted because you're not actually building that natural intimacy together. Hormone levels are going to be lower. There's going to be more stress. The stakes are going to be higher. And actually, with couples who are more successful and you're more financially intertwined, and again, the stakes are really, really high, oftentimes it's actually harder to leave that relationship. And so bad relationships keep going for longer than
Mhm.
maybe they would if there was nothing, right? If you're not married, or if you don't have any properties together and you don't have any investments together, you don't have kids, it's probably a lot easier to walk away. So that's kind of one of the things. The other thing is there's also this kind of fear, and I see this a lot, especially with male founders. There's a fear of being single again. And so often they will stay in relationships that aren't healthy for them. In some cases, actually, quite frankly, abusive. And they will stay because they're so afraid of being single, because they're like, I don't have the time to date. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't want to. I'm actually quite introverted. So that's like another reason why often like bad relationships can stay. But then in terms of kind of where it can go wrong, it really does boil down to this kind of cocktail of busyness, being distracted by the busyness. Often, actually, as well, I will add, when you have the financial resources, because you're both, let's say, doing quite well, you can distract yourself even further from the state of the relationship, right? So it's very easy to get a quick dopamine hit by booking a nice holiday away, or having a really nice date night, or throwing a gathering with friends and family. I hear all the time that these things are like really lovely distractions from actually what's going on between the two partners, which is actually probably going to be broken down communication, misalignment of values, probably not understanding each other, right? Often I see if there's a very high-powered, successful female, the spouse might not understand her work. Why does she love it so much? What does it give her, right? And she might feel defensive. And so there's another breakdown there. So it really is, I keep saying, like a cocktail of things that can go wrong. And all of it kind of needs untangling at the end of the day if we want to get the clarity on like what's actually here between these two people.
That's right. And I find that with a lot of executives, managers, whoever you want to call it again, there's a lack of communication when it comes to, they can have better communications at work, but when it comes to the relationship, that communication is lacking.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so the communication in the home, in the relationship. Yeah. Well, first of all, no one ever teaches us how to communicate in relationship, right? At most, we might get some basic communication training if you're a manager or an executive, but that's going to be business communication. That's very different. You're not going to be bringing your full heart-centered, vulnerable, intimate self in that kind of environment. And so what I see a lot of is that people bring this kind of business communication into their personal relationship, which can be productive. Like, don't get me wrong, it can be productive. Absolutely. If that's your segue into getting you to talk, great. But it doesn't bring the kind of embodied experience of intimacy and connecting, right? Because it's very heady, very rational. You can say something and mean it and think your way through it and be very logical and very reasonable. But actually, if you're disconnected from the neck down and your heart's shut off because you're in business mode,
Yes.
you can't possibly connect with your partner, nor can you even hear them and see them fully, and nor can they hear and see you. So already we have two kind of performances going on. It's not deep, vulnerable, genuine connection. It's a performance. We're both performing. We're performing a communications role, right? Like we would perform in a business environment.
That's right.
That doesn't work in relationship. To actually communicate well in relationship, yes, you need some structure. You need a bit of that kind of more masculine-centered, I guess, businessy way of doing things, like turn taking, and conscious listening and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, it's more of an embodied experience. It's about being in the body and literally being in the heart and in your core and being mindful of what's going on there at that level as you are connecting, right? Because connection is more than just what we're saying. But we don't learn how to do that.
No.
And I will add as well, just quickly, like when we're rushing around doing our, 50, 60-hour weeks, running to the gym and networking and doing all these things, we have less time. We have less spaciousness, right?
What about active listening?
Yeah. What about it?
I think that's again another area as a part of communication that
Yeah.
people lack in the relationships. If and I see that lacking in leadership as well. Just like you need to actively listen to your, team members, you also need to do that in relationships in order
Yeah.
to actually really hear your partner out and what their needs are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. And I think there is something to be said that when we are in a business environment, we're doing active listening. I still don't really think it's active listening. Sorry to say, but I do believe, and this could be just me projecting from what I've seen though, that when we're in a business environment, you can be active listening as much as you want, but again, the environment that you're in requires an element of role playing. Unless you're a founder and you're actually nurturing an idea with a co-founder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there is that kind of, because I fully believe when I do coaching with co-founders, I'm like, this is marriage coaching. Let's be honest here, right? This is a marriage, very different level of intimacy. But if you're in a business environment, you're doing active listening, 9 times out of 10, your brain is still going to be already thinking about what you're going to say next because there's an agenda. And that agenda is to be seen as someone who's competent, to be seen as someone who's, doing well, to not make an ass out of yourself, and to essentially either get promoted or climb the ladder, whatever it is. In relationship, that active listening has to be very different because really there shouldn't be an agenda.
Yes.
Only agenda we should ever have in a relationship is to nurture the relationship. And I always say that it's like there are 3 entities at any given point, right? There's you, your partner, and the relationship. Your job, the 2 of you, is to nurture that relationship.
That's right.
Right? That's kind of paramount. And then obviously it's to nurture yourselves and nurture each other. But really it's like, what does the relationship need right now? And so when we're active listening, the agenda is just like, what does the relationship need? Well, the relationship's going to need me to listen to this person. Because if I don't listen to them, then I'm already damaging this relationship. And so it's really about taking that ego aside and being open-hearted and being curious, right? Kind of the golden C word, being curious. But it's a very different type of skill to the business active listening. At least I think.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's, on the relationship side, there's more emotional that's involved, where, in the business side, you kind of have to put some of the emotions away at times. So that's perfectly said. Could you please explain some of the key principles from the behavioral science of attraction that you apply in your Successfully in Love method?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So there's kind of 3 main pillars to it. Pillar 1 is the liberation pillar. This is my favorite one. It's my favorite one because it does everything that therapy does in about a month. So you don't need to do, 15 years of therapy. And don't get me wrong, I love therapy. I will always love therapy, but it's more cathartic and more about awareness building than actually solving the problem.
Yes.
And so what this stage does, the liberation phase, is we build awareness, understand the problem, get really clear on what are your patterns and how are you showing up, whether it's when you're single or when you're in a relationship, and where might you be blocking yourself? And again, this is not conscious, right? So maybe a better way of saying it is like, what's blocking you? And looking at different patterns of self-sabotage, of disconnect, of avoidance, of potentially chasing someone and having low self-worth, whatever it might be. But looking at the patterns that are getting in the way of you being in a healthy, secure relationship. So identifying what those are. And then crucially, and I'm obsessed with doing this, and I haven't seen this be done anywhere in the relationship coaching world, apart from with my teacher, who is a miracle worker. But I help the client clear those patterns and the core wounds beneath the patterns out at their core root level, so that really you clear them once and for all, and they're done, right? And then give the tools and techniques so you can keep clearing them, so that when you do go ahead and start building a massive business, if they start to kind of rear their little heads up again, you know exactly how to bash them and get rid of them. And it's not something that you have to spend months processing or, doing tapping or whatever other methodologies people have, or getting a hypnotherapist. It's something that you can do yourself to eliminate things at a core root level, because that's where we have to be working. You can't be just working on like energy or body. It has to be on a neuroscientific core level. So that's the liberation phase. Once you've cleared everything out that's holding you back, we move to phase 2, pillar 2, the behavioral science phase. And this is where we start to get really clear, now that you can see more clearly, What is it that you actually need? What do you actually need in your relationship to be happy long term? What does that look like, right? Because most people know what they want, but they don't know what they need. They know exactly what they want. They want their 6'3" guy in finance, but what they need is something very, very different. So it's all about getting really clear and getting really connected to who you are now that you can see and feel clearly with what that is. And then once you know what you need, and I look at everything from kind of a gender dynamics perspective, I look at masculinity, femininity, because that's really kind of my background. I look at the psychology of relationship and compatibility, like what is true compatibility and all of this stuff. But once you know what you really need, then you move to the phase 3, pillar 3, which is the integrity phase. And that's where we start to look at, okay, now that you've cleared out all of the blocks, you know exactly what you need. How do we go about building an action plan around that gets your whole life into integrity, not just your relationship? So that if we know what your needs are, how can we make sure that your finances are taken care of, your career is taken care of, your health is taken care of, and your relationship is something that's kind of woven into everything else and just becomes a part of who you are. And this is really important because so many people kind of put their relationship as like a separate thing, whether it's like, I have to be on the dating apps, or I hate them, or I have to work with a matchmaker, or I have to go to marriage counseling with my husband, whatever it might be. You don't have to kind of silo it as a separate thing, because actually when your whole life is in integrity and you are radiant with your fullness of who you are, then the relationship just becomes like part of that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And then I also talk about communication a lot in this stage too, about how do you communicate with integrity? Now that, again, you know who you are and what you have to say and what you need and what your boundaries are, how do you communicate that in a way that's healthy and nourishing for both you and the person receiving the communication?
No, that's great. Those are great points. I love the pillars that you've mentioned. Now, you work with a lot of executives, Katrina, and tell us how difficult it is for, when people are at that level, again, like we talked about, their ego gets in the way that they're perfect, there's nothing wrong with them. How do they take that first step to realize that they need help? And how can you break through to say you'll be able to help them? Because they look at a lot of people and say, "Oh, I'm good. I don't need anyone's help. I already know what I want." How do you break that that first step to get them to realize that they actually do need help?
Yeah. Simply put, I don't. I don't anymore. I just let the people who are ready and open to come to me. And I learned this the hard way, I'll say, because as someone who is a very high achieving person and wants to help everyone, I definitely would overextend myself to folks who probably weren't there yet. And I would extend a lot of help and a lot of free support and all of this stuff. And in the end, I was like, what am I doing? I'm not behaving like I respect and honor myself. So my own kind of boundary here is like, if you're not ready and you're not willing, then that's okay. Take the time that you need, right? All I will say is that check in with yourself. Is it avoidance? And if it's avoidance, what is it that you're avoiding? If it's fear, that probably needs to be worked through, right? Because fear is a kind of redundant thing. It's not going to help you. And the longer that you spend avoiding a problem in your life, the longer it's going to compound and get worse. And time is running out. Time is running out. It breaks my heart when clients do eventually come to me, but they're like in their late 50s, early 60s. And they tell me that they've been unhappily married for 20 years. And I'm like, goodness gracious me, where were you all this time? It's not too late. It's never too late. Some of my best success stories are actually people in their late 50s, but it is late insofar as if you can make the change sooner, then do it sooner, right? Life is precious. So check in with it with avoidance. And if it's not avoidance, then what is going on for you there that makes you not want to look at your relationship, makes you not want to look at why you can't get into a healthy relationship? What is going on there? Is it because you actually don't need it? Maybe you're, an asexual individual and you just don't need companionship. Okay, great. Be rigorously honest with yourself about that. But definitely like check in, because ultimately the people who I do work with and the people who do, whether they reach out or they find me and we start working together, they get results super fast, super fast. Anything from like 2 weeks to 3 months.
Wow.
They see huge transformation. And I mean like seriously huge. And that's because they're willing and they're ready. right? They come in and with full gusto, and they might be a little bit wary at the beginning because yeah, it's scary. It's scary to look at this part of your life. You don't know what you're going to uncover. You don't know me probably that well. And I think I look really young. People always think I'm in my 20s. I'm not in my 20s. But the point is that they probably, you know, there is like a lot of fear there. But the point is, once you're in and you have the science and you have the support and you have the structure and you have a methodology and you have, in my case with my work, you have a community as well, you can get incredible results so quickly. So one thing that I have learned is I can't rush anyone to do the work. I might want to help them, you know, but I can't help them until they want to be helped, which I still find really hard. But
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, and that's my rule too, is like if you're not committed to the process, you know, it's a waste of both of our time and you know, obviously your money. So that's great. And I think again, it's important for people to do that self-reflection often and put their pride away and their ego away and say, hey, you know, I've got a problem. I need to talk to somebody that can help me out. So it's great that you're doing this. So you mentioned that there is a significant percentage of CEOs and leaders who experience loneliness. Why do you think loneliness is so prevalent amongst successful people, and how can it be addressed effectively?
Yeah. Why is it so prevalent in successful people? There's something one of my clients said to me, and she's a very successful female founder, and she was like, it's lonely at the top. It's just lonely at the top, right? And that is a belief that she has, and we've kind of worked through that and challenged that a little bit and dismantled it. But ultimately, I get her point. There is an element of truth in that it's both lonely at the top and it's also really lonely at the bottom, right? It's kind of in that in-between space that you're probably full of potential connections, but whether you're, you know, God forbid, homeless, or whether you're a multi-millionaire, there can be a loneliness there. And that's because you're not part of the masses. You are different fundamentally. Right. And in being different, you're going to have a different set of problems, a different lifestyle, different things to have to solve for. And your thinking's going to be different. Your worldview is going to be different. So already you're kind of different to the community that you're in. That's inevitably going to create some kind of a loneliness sensation there. A lot of that, though, isn't, not that it's not real, but it doesn't have to feel as big as it can feel, right? Because ultimately, how many people do you really need in your life, right? We don't need 30 best friends and, you know, 50 spouses. No, you just need like one life partner, if that's what you're looking for, and a handful of really good friends. So you don't need a lot. And yet, because we live in this world of kind of scarcity, right? There's never enough of anything. Not only do we feel that we're very different, but there's also never enough. So you put these two kind of, I guess, like, not ideology, these kind of two concepts that we're grappling with. And of course, we feel alone at the top. And then on top of that, this is where it gets really, really good. You've got your core wounds, right? Because how did you get to the top? Well, you were probably fueled by a sense of maybe not being good enough, maybe a sense of being wounded as a child. Maybe you didn't get your needs met as a child. Maybe you weren't listened to. Maybe you weren't heard. And so from that wounded place, you've done incredible things with your career and you've climbed incredible ladders and you've achieved a lot and you're very, very successful. But that wound is still there. It's still there. And when we have that wound and we haven't tended to it, we're going to feel lonely because we're going to be disconnected from ourselves. And so the real work there is to lean back inward and reconnect with yourself. And really, all the work that I do, yes, I work in relationship. The kind of the bread and butter of what I do, though, is helping you connect back to yourself, to come home to yourself, and do the clearing, like clean that house. Right. So that the stuff isn't, you know, molding and festering and gathering dust in there, but clean it all up so it's nice and shiny like you are on the outside, so that you can feel connected to yourself and therefore more able to connect with others.
That's right. That's awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question I'm pretty sure is on a lot of people's mind. And I think I've heard this from some people, but I want to hear it from you. Have any of your successful clients told you that I'm willing to trade my fame and fortune not to be alone and to be in a loving relationship with someone?
I love that. I've not heard those words. What I have heard, though, is when clients get their success story, right? And this is the kind of most obvious success story is going to be someone who finds a healthy partner, right? Whether it's that they've walked away from one partner. I had one client in particular who we met when he was in a relationship. He wasn't sure if he was with the right person, and he wanted to find someone that, you know, would kind of last, would go the distance. And again, stakes are very high with him. He had kids, he had assets, blah, blah, blah. He wasn't going to be open to just anyone. And he really thought he was doomed. And he'd kind of settled for this person. And so I helped him get clear on whether he should stay with this person or leave. Obviously, he had to leave. It was quite clear. So he left her. And then within 3 months, he met a woman who he is obsessed with in the most healthy sense, right? Like they're so happy together, like radiant, absolutely radiant. He didn't think he'd meet anyone. And she's stunning, and they're happy, and they're traveling, and they're living their dream life, and blah, blah, blah. And every time I kind of catch up with him, I'm always like, you know, how are things going? And he's like, things are going really well. And he's like, honestly, because he says to me all the time, he's like, you know, I want to help you. I want to help you help more people, because the price I paid for this is like nothing.
Yes.
What would I pay in retrospect to have met her, to have this, to feel so focused, to feel so clear, to feel so healthy in my own skin? He's like, I sleep better, I eat better, I work better, I love my kids better. He's like, this is all priceless. And at one point he was like, would I pay like 100K? Yeah, no problem. And I was like, I should raise my rates. But right, so like this stuff is priceless, ultimately.
It is. Absolutely. I think, again, you can't really put a value on yourself in your life and becoming better. And once you realize that, you will go back and say, I would have paid anything for this.
Totally.
Right. So that's a great story. Now, how do gender dynamics play a role in dating challenges? You know, faced by successful women and men, are there differences in the challenges they face? And how do you address these in your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. There are challenges. And this is kind of the rabbit hole I went down when I was previously engaged to my ex-fiance, kind of navigating all of that. And I think that there's been kind of a problematic discourse in a lot of the relationship coaching that I've seen. I wouldn't say like in kind of this is terrible, like the higher brow circles, but like, I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean. But on Instagram is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, there's been a lot. There's been a lot of discourse around like polarity and masculinity and femininity and sexual attraction and how to get the woman and all of this stuff, which sure, it's, you know, a nice idea and it's a very good marketing. It's very like easy and snappy, and it's like, you're a man, you got to be masculine. You're a woman, you got to be feminine. Like, here's what femininity is. It's being soft. It's being, you know, emotional and wearing floaty dresses, and being a man is about being stoic. And it's very like nice wrapped up little ideas. And I studied this my entire academic career. And one of the things that I was very clear on when I was doing my master's at Oxford was that, yes, there is a polarity difference between men and women. Yes, there is like masculine to feminine. However, every single human being on the planet is a blend of both energies. They're a blend of both qualities, right? You might have a leaning towards one or the other, and a lot of that leaning will be socially conditioned. You might have a kind of a biological leaning, absolutely, but the difference is much smaller than how it's made out to be, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all human, and we all have the same emotions, the same fears. We love the same. The emotions, the heart, all of this is the same. The polarity stuff is like the icing on the cake. It's like that lovely piece of us that makes us different. And something actually one of my favorite teachers says, he's like, you got to start with intimacy first in any relationship. And intimacy is recognizing that you and I are the same. Doesn't matter that we look different. Doesn't matter we have different like sex organs, whatever. Like, we're the same. We are the same. And then the polarity bit, the fun bit, comes with recognizing the slight differences in each other and amplifying those and playing with those. But at the foundational level, we are the same. And one of the things that I run into so much is working with either successful men or successful women who are almost trapped in their kind of the polarity ideas.
Yes.
So what that might look like is working with a highly successful male founder he's, built his career up, he's got his wealth, etc., etc. And his mentality or his belief system before we start working together is that he has to be like ultra masculine. He has to be like very manly, very strong, very stoic if he wants to win the woman. Well, now, what does that mean in practice? It means that he's going to be a bit shut down from his emotions. It means that anger is going to be the main emotion that's kind of easy to express. It's going to mean that he's going to be pretty disconnected from himself, right? And so all of these different kind of traits, which aren't really they're not working for him, they're hurting him, are made manifest. And actually it's about bringing more of that integrated, healthy energy to him, of being a bit more feminine, to be honest, without using the word feminine, right? But able to connect with himself more, whatever the practices might look like, so that he can actually expand his capacity to connect with a healthy, integrated woman. Because when you are so far on one end of the polarity, when you're so far down the masculinity route, logically, because the human mind and the human body always is seeking equilibrium, you're going to be attracting your opposite, right?
Yes.
Now, your opposite might sound lovely. I see this a lot, the attractive, hot, ultra feminine woman. But does she have a job? Maybe not. Can she manage her finances? Often not, right? And if you're dating someone very, very young, then there's kind of a weird infantile complex going on there. And actually, she's not a life partner. She's not a good match. She's not someone that you can let your guard down to, reveal your emotions to, and actually relax with, right? Because often that's what you need. You need more of a balance. And same thing with women. When I see a very high-powered woman, and this is kind of the position I was in, and I was questioning the whole time, am I too masculine? You hear about it all the time, right? I'm this ultra masculine woman. So I would wear pink. I'd wear a skirt to the office, I'd have my long nails, and I'd be working away, trying to be more feminine. In the end, I was this is rubbish. This is absolute nonsense. At the end of the day, what do I need to do? I need to be with the right person in the first place, which I wasn't. So that was a big part of the problem. But it is about being more integrated, being more balanced, and having more of that capacity to kind of move between the two, right? Of being independent, but also being compatible with someone else. So I'm kind of warbling on here. The point is, what I see a lot of the problems being is that there's kind of a very two-dimensional view of how we should, quote unquote, be in relationship to be attractive. And really, the truth is somewhere a lot more nuanced, right? All of that attraction malarkey is great for the bedroom, go nuts over there. But when it comes to actually having a healthy relationship, we need more balance. We need more integration. We need more men to be able to relax and not feel so horribly lonely, because the suicide rate there is terrible.
Yes.
And we need more women to feel comfortable being able to go earn money, be a breadwinner, if it works out for you, go nuts. You shouldn't be ashamed for that.
So I want to touch base on a point you mentioned earlier in providing your answer, is the social media piece. And right now, everyone's all over it, and people are so drawn to what you said. And I believe that, social media puts people in certain boxes. And I think in today's society, there's more segregation going, splitting of the males and the females. They're trying to make, women more masculine and men more feminine. And that's just my opinion. And I think that's going to hurt people getting into relationships, because it's already creating a lot of tension and resentment amongst the sexes. And again, to what you said, do you think people are losing their authenticity by looking at all this stuff? And we're constantly looking at content that's telling us to do this, be that. If you want to attract a woman, you got to be XYZ. And honestly, I think they're just following that and losing who they really are.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
100%. And that's kind of the rabbit hole that I went down, right, with my first fiance. And really the truth of it is, it's park all of that,
Yes.
Put it aside, and just do one thing. Start identifying what are your core wounds,
Yes.
and identify the best strategies to clear those out. Because once you have cleared those out, everything opens up for you, and you can discover who are you at your core. And you're probably pretty great, and you're going to love what you find out, right?
That's right.
Because that's going to be who you are at an authentic, shining level with your full potential. But you can't see that if you've got all these core wounds playing out, and they're what's going to be driving you, because it's narrative I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me, to start looking on Instagram or following all these different coaches or whatever about like, oh, I need to do this now. I have to do this. I have to do this. Oh, now this is out of fashion. Now I have to do it like this. And it's exhausting.
It is.
And just clear out the core wounds. It takes like 3 months, 21 days if you're really efficient. Get rid of them and then just relax and see who you become.
Yes.
Because I'm willing to bet it's going to be exponentially better than anyone you can role play.
100%. I think at some point of the relationship, the true you is going to come out anyway. So you
For
might
sure.
have it
Yeah.
at the beginning.
And you'd rather that was a secure version of you than some insecure hot mess.
Absolutely.
Right?
Exactly. So Katrina, I want to ask you, how important is self-care and personal development in cultivating successful relationship, especially for those who are highly career focused?
I would say I think it's the most important thing. And the reason for that isn't because I'm here being like, I'm a relationship coach, come work with me. But no, but it's your body and your mind is a personal thing, right? You basically outsource it when you go, not outsource it, but you put it out on loan when you go to work or when you're building a business, when you're whatever. Your actual thoughts, your actual psyche, your motivation, the drivers, all of that internal working, your body, your organism is actually a personal matter.
Yes.
And if you're not investing into developing that, and by developing, I don't even want to say like improving, but to me, it's like maintenance, just maintaining it, right? The same way that you would maintain a car or maintain your home, but it's just like that maintenance of literally cleaning stuff out that no longer serves you. And you'll know if you have stuff that no longer serves you, because if you're not, on cloud 9 right now, feeling 100% happy, then there's going to be something there. And it's part of the human condition. We all have it, right? We all have it. Not to say that you'll be doing this work forever, but just keeping your finger on the pulse of like, how am I feeling? What area of my life could do with a bit of examining?
That's
What
right.
can I do about this, right? And often that will look like, initially at least, getting the help of a professional who specializes in that, who ideally, a good professional should teach you the tools and techniques so that you can then master those tools and techniques, and then you shouldn't need them in the future. And then you can become a greater master of yourself. And then, so on, as you kind of develop in other areas of your life, you learn more tools and techniques and you optimize then. It's a constant journey of optimization. But it's so important because if you don't do that clearing work, your foundations are so unstable, right? A classic example is like the core wounding work, right? I bang on about it because it's so important. It's like the core wound. But if you haven't done the core wounding work and the clearing, and on a fundamental level, you have a core belief that I'm not good enough. I'm just going to stick with that. It's such a big one that a lot of people have, but I'm not good enough. What's going to happen? Well, you can go and build a business. You can have a massive exit, but can you actually keep the money? Can you actually hold on to your success? Or is the narrative and the belief that I'm not good enough going to mean that you're going to self-sabotage? And you see this all the time with celebrities, and people have written whole books on this, right? Like celebrities are great at this because they got thrust into the limelight. They make all this money, but they're unfortunately quite damaged internally a lot of the time. And so they go and squander it or they lose it. Same thing with relationships. If you have a core belief that I'm not good enough, you can get into the relationship with your absolute soulmate, but you will find a way to self-sabotage it. You will, whether that's like fault finding, they start to annoy you a little bit and you start to kind of pick at their problems, or maybe you start to have very different needs and actually start thinking that they're not good enough and actually they're not meeting your needs. Or maybe that you become too needy and you start pushing them away, or maybe you start avoiding them, maybe you have an affair, whatever it might be, but you're going to sabotage it. And so you can't keep anything worth keeping until you have done this inner work. It is so unbelievably important.
100%. No, I agree with what you're saying, because, if we're just working on the surface, it's like, the Band-Aid solution. Once you rip it off, it comes back. So, you keep putting that Band-Aid on, but if you dig deeper and, find the root cause and fix the root cause, that's when you make the significant improvements. So thank you very much for sharing that, Katrina. So we're almost about to wrap up the podcast. We've come to the segment where I call rapid fire questions. I'm going to be asking you a series of questions and let me know what the first thing that comes to mind is.
Sounds good.
So what is your advice to young professional men who want to date and focus on their careers at the same time?
Do the inner work. Do the inner work. Start now. The dividends will be so worth it.
Awesome. And same question, but for women.
Same answer. Do the inner work. We all need to do it.
Awesome. It's good to do it at like beginning stages of your life too. So
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started when I was like 17 and I became a certified coach when I was 17 and did retreats. And I still ended up engaged to the wrong person. Start. But they didn't get to the core wounds at that initial stage. So
nice.
that's why. But yeah.
You live and you learn.
Absolutely.
Awesome. What is the best advice that you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. That's a big question. Best advice. Well, I'll start with something that I don't know if it's advice, but it's a saying that one of my favorite writers, funnily enough, is a book about love. And I learned this when I was like, I think I learned this when I was 14, not even joking. And the saying is, what you risk reveals what you value. And that's always kind of been a bit of a guiding post to me of like, when I take risks in life or when I don't take risks in life, when I play safe, it gives me a clear indicator of like, what am I valuing right now? Right? Who am I? Like, what am I actually solving for? That's a bit of a side piece, but best advice. I think it's probably from my first main relationship coach when I was previously engaged and I was going to her and kind of feeling very uncertain of what am I doing? Am I in the right relationship? You know, am I with the wrong person? I don't know. And I felt like uneasy and anxious. And she kept telling me, and I didn't really understand it back then, but she kept telling me, you have to learn to discern whether what you are feeling is a response in real time to the present moment, and it's a clean response, or is it a past projection? Is it something from your past that's bubbling up in response to the present moment, right? There's like a nuance there. Right. One is coming from a core wound, the past, and one is coming from a gut instinct. And once I learned that, everything changed for me. And that's something that I've been teaching, again, my clients, because I'm like, it's such a game changer to know that.
Amazing. Awesome. What is the one word that describes Katrina best?
Honest came up there. Honest. Yeah, I'll take that.
Good.
Yeah, no, I have a bit of a frustration with a lot of the marketing malarkey that we see out there online, right? In the online world, I think there's so much like junk out there. So one thing I do want to do is like be honest.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Your authentic self. Where can people find you, Katrina?
The best place to find me is going to be on probably my website, www.katrinapolonska.com. There you can access a free training that I have. So just on the homepage, that free training is on the behavioral science of attraction. And I walk through the main pitfalls that I see successful men and women falling into. It's super, super valuable watch. You can also find me on Instagram at Katrina Palena or on LinkedIn, Katrina Polonsky with a Y, slightly different.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you very much for joining me today and sharing your valuable knowledge and inspiring stories with our audience. And for all those out there, if you've got any questions for Katrina, drop them in the box below, or you know how to reach her. And you know, if there's any questions that come into my inbox, I will definitely send it to you to answer. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here today, and have a good one. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everybody.